Oh, you got
There we
muted.
go.
I'll just say second.
We all got muted. Okay. I guess I can't do all in favor. I have a motion from Ms. Smiley and a second from Ms. Stevens. I vote yes. Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
The minutes are approved. And good morning, Eva. The next thing is our update from Sam Thorpe, but it seems like he's having some audio issues. So I don't know. I don't have his direct contact information.
Oh, well.
There is outreach to him, Mrs. McKenzie, so we're working on the issue, but I'm going to actually turn things over to, well, we have 2 agenda items for today, if my memory serves me correctly. And so if we want to perhaps start with the agenda item around naming of schools, do you want to talk about that? And if so,
sure,
Mrs. Cunningham Brown could lead that discussion while we continue to work with Mr. Thorpe and his technology.
I think that makes a lot of sense. So let's start with policy 9300. Ms. Stevens, would you mind muting when you're not speaking, please? And I will pass it off to Ms. Cunningham Brown. Thank you. You're on mute, Ms. Cunningham Brown.
Good morning, Chair McKenzie, Vice Chair Stevens, Superintendent Felder. I want to bring to you for review and discussion policy 9300 regarding naming facilities and memorials. I know that the district is undergoing conversations and recent decisions around renaming 2 of our schools. And so as that process, I know that staff is expected to come back with a process on doing so. And so wanted to bring this particular policy before you because it is my understanding that it may be a possibility that folks would want to recommend names of people. And I know that the policy has some language around that. And so I'm here today to present policy 9300 for discussion around this topic.
So I don't know if this is a policy that we want to change. Ms. Cunningham Brown reached out yesterday and asked if we wanted to put it on the agenda, and I figured we could just have a chance to review it since we had this meeting before our next board meeting. I think that there is some wisdom in item number A3 about not using the name of a person, but I also, we did say at the last meeting we were interested in maybe taking those nominations and considering them. So it's just open for discussion, really.
If I may?
Of course.
Because I know there have been some questions about this policy, I did, do some looking around. And because I know there have been questions about the origin of that statement that we wouldn't name facilities after people. And I don't know exactly when Orange added it, but I do know that it's not uncommon for districts to have that in their policy. You can find it in many other districts, although certainly not all. And in asking around to my colleagues, the origin is likely that some sort of the same reason that you're renaming schools, that school systems having gone through situations where they name a school after someone and then either that person subsequently did something concerning or subsequently information came to light and then they had to rename it and it becomes a tangle. And so that's, I think, the origin in some districts of that statement. I don't know if it may have originally been in the School Board Association model. It isn't in their policy, their model policy now, but it may have been at one time.
Thanks, Eva.
Yeah, I mean, I remember us adding that early on in the year or maybe year after when Hillary and I came on board. I don't know what sort of the original origins of it were. But I mean, I said this in the school board meeting. I think I'm open to like waiving it if there's like real strong interest in naming a building after a person. So I'm open to collecting all names and then making that decision about whether or not to do that later. Even though I think that rationale makes sense. That's sort of where I'm landing.
One thing to keep in mind is that obviously generally it would take a majority to adopt a new school name, but it would take 2/3 if you want to waive the policy, which could be a good thing. It could mean it only happens in times when there's clear impetus, towards it.
What do you think, Brenda?
Oh, and I was about to say, I agree with Sarah. I agree with waiving the policy. Now, I did, when I was reading through some minutes, I do recall reading that this idea surfaced after the naming of A.O. Standback. And so I agree with Sarah. There's some merit in what we have on the table. However, I would like to waive it right now. And I'm glad that Eva said that it would take, 3/4? So that would be more than a clear majority. So that's good.
Yeah, 2/3.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, 2/3, sorry.
Any other board members on the call? I think maybe it's just Ms. Doyle here with us. Ms. Doyle, do you want to comment on this?
I agree with what Ms. Stevens has just said and what you all are saying. So thank you. I like the 2/3. That's good to know.
Yeah,
I got my calculator to divide some numbers.
Yeah, 5. Okay, any other concerns or anything we want to touch on while we have this on the table? Any other concerns from staff, Dr. Felder, Ms. Stevenson?
I don't have any, thank you.
Okay, well, I think it sounds like we'll just leave it as is. Thank you for bringing it to the discussion, Ms. Cunningham Brown. I think it was worth a double check.
Okay.
And if we decide to name a school after a person, it'll be because 2/3 of us think that's the right thing to do.
Okay.
And now we will move to our other agenda item, which is an update from Mr. Sam Thorpe. Can you hear us now, Sam?
I can't hear
I don't see
Sam.
him on the call.
Yeah.
Let me see. I know he had joined earlier.
I'm here. I can
Okay.
hear you.
Yay!
It's my first time on this platform, everyone. I'm really sorry. I apologize.
No worries. Welcome. Thank you for being here.
Of course.
Well, I'm gonna turn it over to you now.
Okay. I think it makes sense, at least from having talked to Dr. Felder and Ms. Stowe last week, to give you just a brief, very general overview before we get into specific next steps of sort of what I've been doing, working on with respect to your policy project, and what I've been talking to Dr. Felder, Dr. Cunningham Brown, Ms. Stowe about with respect to the project. So basically, the board contracted with us, NCSBA, to do 2 things. One is to provide you with our custom updates, which we do at least 2 of each year. And the reason we say custom updates is because we customize them for you and your school system manual. And so far, you've gotten 2 of those. You've gotten the special update that we sent at the end of July of last year that addressed the new Title IX regulations that were issued by the U.S. Department of Education. And that was a time-sensitive update. And I know you guys have been discussing that and involving your board attorneys. And then second update that we sent was our fall 2020 update. And from what I understand, the board is making some progress in getting through both the Title IX special update as well as the fall 2020 update. The second part of the project, which is a little bit more complicated, has to do with catching Orange County's manual up to speed. for a period of about 3 years, maybe a little more. Many of the policies were not updated. There were multiple updates that weren't reviewed and incorporated into the policies. And so it doesn't mean that all 300 plus policies of your manual are out of date, but there are a pretty good number of policies that are missing 2 updates, 4 updates, sometimes even 6 updates. And some of those are really minor. They're changing the legal reference, a link in a legal reference, or they're changing the alphanumeric code for a state board policy or something like that. Some of them are much more substantive. What I've been trying to do to address this part of the project is review each section of your manual, compare it to our model manual, and then provide you with information about where your policies are current and up to date, where your policies are out of date, and what the specific updates are that haven't been reviewed and or adopted. And then I've also pointed out where Orange County has custom language. Either you have an entire policy that's unique to Orange County, or you have a policy that aligns closely with ours, but you include some language that reflects some unique practices to Orange County. And the reason I point that out is because custom language is on the board attorney administrators to make sure it stays up to date, not just with the law, but also what you're doing in your school system. When I've talked to Dr. Felder and Ms. Stowe, we've discussed what sort of the best strategy is for making sure that you continue progressing well through the custom updates, because we have another one coming out at the end of March, which will have quite a number of policies to update, as well as how do we catch your manual up as quickly and efficiently as possible and responsibly as possible, so as not to make this drag out really long. I think it would be unworkable, at least in talking to Dr. Felder and Ms. Stowe, I think it would be unworkable for the board to go through every single policy individually and review every single missed update. The committee to review it, and then the entire board to review it, and then to adopt it. I think this project could drag on for years. And we actually have some school systems that we've been working on doing work like this for, and it can take 3-4 years. And so what we think could be a really good strategy, at least for the second part of the project, is for Dr. Cunningham Brown and appropriate folks, administrators, deputies, and folks that she identifies in your central office to review the charts that I'm creating for each section, and to make a recommendation to the policy committee, present to the policy committee a recommendation on what to do with those past updates, as opposed to having you review hundreds of updates and talking through those. I'm not sure if this is a good time to talk about specific next steps, if maybe this is a good time for me to answer questions.
There is something, if you don't mind, if I could interject here, one thing that I think will help is, and you have this in policy 2420, is to not bring technical corrections to the board, and that's something that we can figure out as we go through. But
I'm sorry. Sam, do you mind muting? It's the feedback we're getting is really bad.
So sorry.
No problem. Thank you so much.
so the updates that are updates to legal references, to cross references, to numbering, to, that we would authorize the superintendent to adopt those without bringing them to the board. And I think that your policy already does that. It talks about making technical corrections. And that's something that I always encourage, that because it's very overwhelming when a lot of policies come to the board and then you click through each one and it turns out it's just updating a link. So my advice would be that we identify the ones that are just updating a number, a reference, and make it clear that the superintendent's authorized to update those without board approval.
I'm certainly comfortable with that.
Absolutely, and that's the way it was, so that would save us some time.
And that's already written into policy that we do it that way, isn't? I mean, usually they come to us sort of as a courtesy, but it is laid out already that that is an acceptable process, isn't it?
Yeah, we might bring that policy back because it says to correct errors. So I would probably sort of amend that to say to, correct errors or adopt updates to references, something like that.
Well,
But-
let's do that and put it on the agenda for the next board meeting. So that's just a done deal. If
So
Sarah and Brenda agree.
Absolutely,
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll send a draft of that back to go to the next regular board meeting. That's policy 2420.
Okay, Carrie, you good with that too?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Sorry, your camera's off and I just forgot you were here. I'm so sorry. Sarah. You're on mute.
Man, was I like, okay, whatever. So understanding the proposed process. So there's the like technical, legal updates. That sounds great. Then the other places where we're different, the proposal is that Ms. Cunningham Brown and central office team would say, here's what ours says, here's what the school board policy said, these were updates that we missed and our recommendation is to add them, in these cases. These are places where we're different and our recommendation is to keep our version or something like that. And then the policy committee would still look through all of those and agree with them or not, right? We would still have that discussion. We would just be starting from a place of these are the recommendations from staff.
Good morning. If you don't mind, because I've been working with Sam on this project since August, and so I'm so glad we're here. And Sam didn't even reference. I hope, I know you have had to have seen everything's online now. Like you can search policies. So Sam was instrumental in that project. It's great. You can search policies online. They're all digitized. So part of what Sam has recommended and what we're looking at, and actually, I think I would be overseeing this just to get this done and finalize it, would be that we start with 1,000. We start with the governing policies. We assign them accordingly internally because we do have the custom updates. We have we have what we wrote, and the School Board Association has, here's what like 90% of districts accepted. And that the appropriate director, administrator, whomever would look at what we have, what's recommended, and we would go through it and basically provide either we would say, we recommend the updates, here's why, here's a couple sentences, or our policy is very different and we think you might want to look at this. And basically what we would do is we would have meetings and we would do 20 to 30 a meeting. And that would take about 10 to 12 meetings if we go through it that way. That's just a suggestion that if what we have and what the School Board Association has is drastically different, that we would want you to look through those. But if what we have and what they have are minor, a matter of we call it this or that we would make a recommendation to this committee. Here's the changes and we recommend that you accept them. And of course you can, or you can go through all of them.
Does everybody understand what Ms. Stowe was saying?
Well, I understand what she's saying, but I do have one question of Dr. Felder. I hear what Ms. Stowe is saying, how they're going to move forward. And I would hope that moving forward, that it won't get dropped through the cracks like it did a few years ago, because it was, at one point it was handled by Ms. Stowe's department, and then the superintendent switched it and then parceled it out to various staff members, and that's when it started falling through the cracks. Because you didn't have one person handling it. So if Stowe's going to be that point person, we won't have it fall through the cracks as it did before.
Yes.
Because the superintendent parceled each section off to various department heads.
Thank you, Mrs. Stevens. I appreciate you sharing that, and very good point. And so to bring some clarity around who will be the point people or the point staff, the leaders of this work. And so as Melanie stated, she's going to continue to work with Sam to clean up and catch up what has quote unquote fallen through the cracks. So that's going to be her part of the work. But what I've learned, and Sam and both Ms. Cunningham Brown can speak to this, is that in most districts, this work does reside in the Human Resources Department. And so effective immediately, Ms. Cunningham Brown, Teresa will be that point of contact for policy committee. And so the batches will, I believe Mr. Thorpe mentioned that the next batch that will come through is in March. And so she will be the person to facilitate that batch. Now it will include, depending on the policy, it has to go to the right department. So say it's one that involves curriculum and instruction, she will send it to the leadership in that department, but her job will be to follow it through and ensure that it makes it back to the board and goes through the process that it needs to go through to the board. So she will facilitate that, but the farming the policies out to the various departments, that part will continue, but she will oversee that part of the work. So in the foreseeable future, these meetings will involve both Melanie from the angle of the catch-up work and Teresa for the current and future policy work. So that's the plan going forward. Hope that makes sense.
Makes perfect sense. I get it. Thank you for your leadership, Dr. Felder.
Well, thank you, Mrs. Stevens.
Well, are there any other questions or thoughts about this? That certainly seems like a reasonable plan to me. I'm excited to get caught up on policies. Sarah?
Me too. So the timeline for it, I think Ms. Stowe was saying over the course of about 10 to 12 meetings, we could, do you mean like policy committee meetings over the course of like 10 to 12 of these meetings, we could go through these different batches of recommendations that are ready?
That's correct. So we could start, I think at the next meeting we start and then we get a feel, because I don't know if it's going to, go quickly, or maybe we should schedule a meeting or two just to address this. So I think just if we could at the next meeting go through the first 20 to 30 and just get a feel, also we have to get a feel internally, what are the changes that drastic, or is this going to be simple for us to go through?
That's great. Yeah, I mean, I have real interest in us moving through it quickly, as I'm sure everybody on the call does, but sometimes there's legitimately language that like we need to talk about, some of these conversations we've had in like anti-discrimination where it's like, well, it lists these things, but not these other things. And why does it say the Boy Scouts specifically? Like, some of that stuff where like we are going to need to talk about it. So one thing I am committing to is like doing my homework before the meetings, right? And for us not to, sometimes it's the walking through every detail and every recommendation and sort of saying it again that I think we could save some time there. Like, I think if we as a committee can say, we will read this and come in with a like, yep, this is what I want to talk about, then we could just save time in the meeting and get through more of them.
I think we can definitely coordinate in that way. And I think that we can streamline it. So we can use the first meeting as a starting place and we can kind of see how it goes, and we'll tweak it as we work through them and just try to do it as efficiently as possible. And one other suggestion I just want to throw out there is I don't necessarily want to put this all on Dr. Keeling's shoulders, but, you know, I think that we have all talked about like an equity audit of our policy manual. And maybe there's some room as we're going through all of these policies to look through that lens as well while we're doing it.
I think that's a great idea too. Maybe even like just as board members, like what lens should we be looking, what questions should we be asking ourselves as we're looking at it? Something along those lines. So that we're trying to do our part to spot those things too.
Maybe I can, sorry, Dr. Felder, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to jump in. I think that's a great recommendation, but I think it's all about work. And so to where I think I heard Mrs. Smiley going, maybe if we can generate some questions that would help us to have that lens as we're looking at the policies and reviewing them, whether it's a department, board members, I think that would be helpful. And of course, Dr. Keeling can, be a point person for an additional layer if necessary. But I think that's a great strategy.
Dr. Felder, maybe if it's okay with you, I can work with Dr. Felder to kind of put just a quick list for board members to look through. And there may be some tool already out there that she can just point us to, like the racial equity
Pocket guide.
assessment. Yeah,
that's a great
so maybe something like that. But maybe we can just get her 2 cents and see if there are any other tools she's aware of.
Sure.
And just share that before the first update so that, we can just put that lens on it too.
Sounds great. And then I had one other question for Mr. Thorpe. Speaking of streamlining, are there any other strategies or recommendations you have, Mr. Thorpe, that would help us in streamlining of the policies that need caught up on, that you would recommend to us?
I would, and you probably are already doing this, but to the extent your in-house administrators can go ahead and get any legal questions you have answered by Eva before you get to the meeting. I'm sure some board members may have some questions for the board attorney, but to the extent you can have those questions answered and buttoned up, I've noticed that can move the process along more quickly.
Well, our board would never have questions, so that won't take any time. Anyway, well, this has been great. I'm looking forward to the project. Does anybody have anything else? This has been a very shockingly speedy and efficient meeting, but I will never complain about that.
Right. I have a question for Sam. Sam, this is Brenda. Do you know if you all are working on, or if you're thinking about a policy having to do with online professionalism?
Could you be more specific?
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm gonna come by there. I'll talk to you next week because we have some, so we'll talk, okay?
Just give me a call.
I will.
We're always looking for something folks are interested in.
Yeah, well, that's a policy that's in other states, and so I will talk to you about it.
Okay.
I was going to talk to Leanne when I talked to her, but I thought I'm going to talk to Sam first. Okay. All right.
Please, you can call me anytime. You know that.
All right, I'll do it.
All right. Well, Dr. Felder, Eva, Sam, Ms. Cunningham-Brown, is there anything else we need to touch on before we adjourn? Okay. Well, I will thank you all for being here, and we'll see you next month. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Stevens?
Yes.
Ms. Smiley?
Yes.
I vote yes as well. We're adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
Bye.
Dr. Felder? Are you
Yes,
still there?
yes, ma'am.
So
I'm here.
I don't have anything. All right. I don't have anything on my list today. Do
Okay.
you?
I
I
do
think we're scheduled to meet
Yeah.
today.
We are scheduled.